December 22nd, 1945. Arlon, Belgium, 11 miles south of Bastogne. The wind cuts through the stone archway like a frozen blade. Staff Sergeant Daniel Morgan stamps his boots against the cobblestones, trying to force feeling back into his toes. Around him, men from the 6th Armored Division huddle in doorways and beneath canvas tarps, their breath forming white clouds that vanish into the gray morning. They've been here for 2 days, waiting for orders that keep changing, listening to rumors that keep getting worse. Morgan watches a column of fresh replacements shuffle past, their uniforms still the wrong shade of green. Too new, too clean. Even after 3 days of hard marching, these men look like they just stepped off a training field in Georgia. The veterans call them green replacements, or just the Greens. Some use less charitable terms. A German propaganda leaflet tumbles across the square, caught in an eddy of wind and snow. Morgan picks it up, reads the blocky text promising warm beds and hot meals to any American soldiers smart enough to surrender. He crumbles it and tosses it aside. The Germans have been dropping these things for days, along with something else: contempt. Captured Wehrmacht officers interrogated at division headquarters have been remarkably consistent in their assessment of American reinforcements. Untested, poorly trained, no combat experience. The phrase that keeps appearing in intelligence reports is second-rate formations. The 6th Armored Division earned its nickname Super 6th during the breakout from Normandy. But that was months ago, and the division that fought across France isn't the same one shivering in Belgium. Casualties and transfers have gutted the veteran companies. The men filling those gaps arrived in November and December, pulled from training camps that were rushing soldiers through basic instruction to feed the hungry front lines. Even the tankers, the pride of any armored division, include crews who've never fired their main guns in combat. Morgan knows what the Germans think because he's heard it from prisoners. They laugh at the Americans, these green replacements trying to play soldier in a real war. The Wehrmacht has been fighting since 1939. Their officers cut their teeth in Poland and France, survived the meat grinder of the Eastern Front. What do they have to fear from boys who were probably picking crops or working factory lines 6 months ago? Bastogne sits 11 miles to the north, surrounded and cut off. The 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles, are trapped inside the town, along with elements of the 10th Armored Division and various headquarters units. They've been holding out for 5 days now, fighting off repeated attacks while their ammunition and medical supplies dwindle. The weather has been too poor for airdrops, too poor for air support. The Germans know it, the Americans know it, and everyone knows that Bastogne has to hold, because if it falls, the entire Allied position in the Ardennes could collapse. General Patton promised to break the siege. His Third Army has been racing north, trying to punch through the German lines and open a corridor to the surrounded garrison. But the Germans aren't cooperating. Every road north is contested. Every village costs blood. And the weather keeps getting worse. Morgan's company commander, Harold Fisher, emerges from a requisitioned cafe that's serving as battalion headquarters. His face has the drawn, sleepless look that every officer wears these days. He gathers his platoon leaders with a gesture. "We're moving out in 1 hour," Fisher says. His voice is hoarse from shouting orders over engine noise and artillery. One of the lieutenants, a replacement officer who arrived 2 weeks ago, asks the question everyone is thinking. "What are our chances of getting through, sir?" Fisher doesn't answer immediately. He looks north, towards Bastogne, though there's nothing to see but snow and low clouds. The 101st is out of time. We get through, or they don't make it. That's all the calculation that matters. The men begin their preparations with the methodical efficiency of soldiers who understand that survival depends on details. Ammunition is redistributed, tank engines are coaxed to life in the bitter cold. Medics check their supplies, knowing they won't be enough. The veterans move with practiced economy, conserving energy for what's coming. The replacements watch and imitate, learning in real time what the training camps never taught them. Morgan checks his rifle, his ammunition pouches, his canteen. Everything is in order because disorder gets you killed. He looks at the faces around him, trying to memorize them, knowing that some of these men won't be here tomorrow. The snow is falling harder now, fat flakes that stick to wool and metal and skin. The temperature is dropping. Everything is wet and cold and miserable, and they haven't even started fighting it. Somewhere to the north, the men of the 101st Airborne are counting their last rounds, rationing their last medical supplies, wondering if anyone is coming. The Germans are counting too, calculating how many more days until the weather clears, until their own reinforcements arrive, until Bastogne starves or surrenders. But the Germans don't know about Morgan and Fisher and 10,000 other stubborn Americans who've decided that green uniforms don't matter as much as what you do when the shooting starts. They're about to find out. The engines are running. The column is forming. Bastogne is waiting. The column lurches forward at 1300 hours, a serpent of steel and flesh winding through the narrow Belgian roads. Sherman tanks lead the way, their treads chewing through ice and mud, throwing up frozen spray that coats the infantry following behind. Morgan's half-track pitches and rolls as the driver fights to keep it from sliding into the drainage ditches that line both sides of the road. The men inside hold on to whatever they can reach, trying to keep their rifles out of the slush that sloshes across the floor. Visibility drops to less than 100 yards. The blizzard that's been threatening all morning finally arrives with full force, turning the world into a wall of white static. Tank commanders button up their hatches, losing their best view of the terrain. Infantry squads bunch together, afraid of losing sight of the men ahead. This is exactly what the Germans want. Bad weather grounds American aircraft, negates American artillery spotting, turns American mobility into a liability on icy roads. 3 miles to the north of Arland, the column halts. Word filters back through the line, roadblock ahead. The lead tanks have spotted a felled tree across the road, and the engineers are checking for mines. Morgan and his squad dismount, grateful for the chance to move, to fight the numbness spreading through their limbs. They take up positions in the snow-covered fields flanking the road, weapons pointed at the tree line 60 yards away. The forest is too quiet. No birds, no movement, just the wind howling through bare branches and the muffled sound of men working to clear the obstacle. Morgan's gut tells him something is wrong, but everything is wrong in this place, so the warning doesn't narrow down much. The first shot cracks out from the woods like a branch snapping. A tanker working on the roadblock spins and falls. Then the tree line erupts. Muzzle flashes wink through the snow like malevolent fireflies. MG-42 machine guns open up with their distinctive ripping sound, firing so fast the individual shots blur into a continuous roar. Bullets snap overhead and punch into the half-tracks with metallic clings that sound almost musical. Morgan hits the ground, his face pressed into snow that tastes like dirt and diesel. Around him, men are shouting, returning fire, trying to locate targets in the white chaos. A replacement next to him, a kid named Patterson from Ohio, freezes with his rifle halfway to his shoulder. Morgan grabs the back of his collar and drags him behind the minimal cover of a frozen furrow. "Pick a spot and shoot at it," Morgan yells over the noise. "Don't wait to see them, just shoot." The Shermans rotate their turrets, trying to acquire targets through the blizzard. The 75mm guns bark, sending high-explosive rounds into the forest. Trees explode in showers of splinters and snow. The German machine guns pause, relocate, resume firing. This isn't a major defensive position, it's a delaying action, designed to slow the American advance, force them to deploy, waste time and ammunition. Captain Fisher is on the radio, calling for artillery support, but the response is negative. Fire missions are backed up all along the front. Every other unit is in contact, everyone needs fire support, and the forward observers can't see their targets through the storm. The 6th Armored Division is on its own. Fisher makes the decision to flank. 2 platoons push west to the fields while the tanks maintain suppressing fire. Morgan's squad is part of the flanking element. They move in a ragged line, bent low, trying to use the terrain for cover, but there isn't much terrain to use. Just flat farmland buried under 8 inches of fresh snow. The cold is ferocious. Morgan's feet are numb, despite the wool socks and double layers. His hands are clumsy inside his gloves, making it hard to manage his rifle. They reach a stone wall that marks a property boundary. Morgan risks a look over the top. The German position is visible now, maybe 40 yards away. He can see figures moving between the trees, repositioning a machine gun. He signals to his squad, points out the target. They open fire together, a ragged volley that kicks up snow and bark. One of the German soldiers goes down. The others scramble for better cover. The flanking maneuver works because it has to work. The Germans are outnumbered and they know it. Their job was to delay, not die. After 15 minutes of vicious close-range fighting, they break contact and withdraw deeper into the forest. The Americans don't pursue.
There's no time. Bastogne is still 11 miles away, and they've barely covered 3. The column reorganizes. Medics treat the wounded. 2 dead are wrapped in shelter halves and loaded onto a supply truck, and the advance resumes. It's 14:45 hours. They've been moving for less than 2 hours, and already the unit is bloodied, slowed, exactly as the Germans intended. Patterson, the replacement from Ohio, sits in the back of the half-track with his rifle across his knees. His hands are shaking, but not from the cold. Morgan doesn't say anything. There's nothing to say. The kid did his job. He shot when he was supposed to shoot, moved when he was supposed to move. That's all anyone can ask. The road climbs a slight rise, and for a moment the blizzard thins enough to see the countryside ahead. More forest, more villages, more places for the Germans to hide and fight and delay. The landscape looks empty, peaceful even, buried under its white blanket, but Morgan knows better now. Every tree line could be hiding an ambush, every village could be fortified, every mile between here and Bastogne is going to cost. The temperature continues to drop as afternoon fades towards evening. Ice forms on weapons and equipment. Men beat their hands against their sides, trying to maintain circulation. The tanks develop mechanical problems from the cold. One throws a track and has to be abandoned. Another's engine seizes, the oil too thick to circulate properly. The maintenance crews work frantically to keep the remaining vehicles running. At 6:30 p.m., with darkness coming early under the storm clouds, the column reaches the outskirts of Bougainville. Intelligence reported the village was unoccupied. Intelligence was wrong. The lead Sherman takes a Panzerfaust round in its side armor and brews up, black smoke and orange flames boiling into the gray sky. The crew bails out, 3 of them on fire, rolling in the snow to extinguish the flames. German infantry emerges from the buildings, firing rifles and submachine guns. Mortars start dropping on the road, forcing the following vehicles to scatter. The battle for Bougainville lasts until after dark. The Americans fight from house to house, clearing rooms with grenades and rifle fire, learning urban combat through brutal trial and error. The replacements stop being replacements. They're just soldiers now, doing terrible work in terrible conditions because someone has to do it. By the time Bougainville is secure, the 6th Armored Division has advanced less than 5 miles. They've lost 7 tanks, 3 half-tracks, and 42 men killed or seriously wounded. They're behind schedule. The blizzard shows no sign of letting up. And Bastogne is still 6 miles away, defended by Germans who have no intention of letting anyone through. In the ruins of a shot-up barn that serves as temporary headquarters, Captain Fisher steadies his map by flashlight. His face is hollow from exhaustion. The radio crackles with reports from other units. All of them bad. The 4th Armored Division's main thrust has stalled. German counterattacks are intensifying. The weather forecast promises more snow, more cold, more misery.
Morgan stands guard outside, watching the darkness, listening to the wind. Somewhere to the north, the 101st Airborne is listening too, wondering if help is coming, wondering if anyone can break through. The Germans are listening as well, confident in their defensive positions, contemptuous of these green American units that are supposed to be their opposition. Tomorrow will prove who's right. December 23rd arrives without fanfare, just the gradual transition from black night to gray dawn. Morgan wakes in a cellar packed with sleeping soldiers, their combined body heat barely keeping the temperature above freezing. Ice crystals have formed on the stone walls. His joints are stiff, his muscles ache, and his feet feel like blocks of wood when he forces them into his frozen boots. Outside, the blizzard has eased to intermittent snow squalls, but the temperature has plummeted, 15 degrees below freezing, maybe colder. Everything not wrapped in wool or shelter halves has a coating of ice. Weapons require careful handling. Skin will stick to bare metal. Tank engines refuse to turn over until mechanics light fires under the crankcases, a dangerous procedure that sometimes works and sometimes results in burning vehicles. The column pushes north at first light, or what passes for first light in this gray half-world. The road to Bastogne runs through a series of ridgelines and small valleys, terrain that favors defenders. German observers on the high ground can see the American advance coming from miles away. Radio intercepts confirm what everyone already suspects. The Wehrmacht knows exactly where the 6th Armored Division is headed and has positioned forces to stop them.
At 0820 hours, the lead elements reach a crossroads 2 miles south of Bastogne. The village of Bastogne sits on the left, a cluster of stone buildings partially obscured by smoke from earlier shelling. The main road continues straight, climbing a long open slope toward the ridge that overlooks Bastogne. And there, dug in along that ridge, are the Germans. He can see them through his binoculars, or at least he can see their positions. Fighting holes carved into the frozen earth, machine gun nests reinforced with logs and sandbags, the dark shapes of anti-tank guns positioned to cover the road, a textbook defensive line mutually supporting with clear fields of fire across the entire approach. Taking that ridge will require a frontal assault across open ground with minimal cover. It will be bloody. But there's no alternative. Every other route is either blocked or it would take too long. The 101st Airborne doesn't have time for elegant maneuvers. They need a direct breakthrough, and they need it now. The attack begins with artillery, American guns firing from positions miles to the south. Shells scream overhead and impact along the ridge, throwing up geysers of frozen earth and snow. The barrage lasts 10 minutes, longer than usual given the ammunition shortages, but still not enough to suppress a determined defense. When the shelling stops, the Shermans roll forward, infantry following in their wake. The Germans wait until the tanks are halfway up the slope before opening fire. An 88mm anti-tank gun positioned in a barn foundation speaks first, its flat crack distinctive even in the chaos. The lead Sherman takes the round through its frontal armor and stops dead, smoke pouring from its hatches. The second tank tries to maneuver, throws a track on the icy slope, and becomes a stationary target. Another 88mm round, and it's burning. Machine guns rake the infantry. Mortars drop along the slope, airbursts that spray shrapnel across the exposed ground. Men go down, some screaming, some silent. Morgan's squad is pinned behind a low stone wall that barely qualifies as cover. Bullets chip the stones, sending rock fragments spinning through the air. Patterson, the kid from Ohio, is crying and shooting at the same time, his rifle banging away on semi-automatic while tears freeze on his cheeks. Nobody mocks him. Half the men are crying too, from fear or cold or the sheer overwhelming horror of it all. Captain Fisher's on the radio, shouting for smoke shells, for more artillery, for anything that might help. The response is the same as yesterday. Everyone is engaged, everyone needs support. Do the best you can with what you have. Fisher throws the handset down and grabs his rifle. If they can't get support, they'll have to take the ridge with what's in front of them. The assault becomes a series of desperate rushes. A squad moves forward 20 yards while another provides covering fire. Then they reverse rolls. Inch by inch, body by body, they climb toward the German positions. The Shermans that are still mobile fire on the move, trying to suppress the anti-tank guns long enough to close the range. 2 more tanks are hit. One crew burns, another manages to bail out, the men running back down the slope through a storm of machine gun fire. Morgan doesn't remember deciding to move. One moment he's behind the wall, the next he's running uphill through knee-deep snow, his lungs burning from the cold air, his legs pumping even though they have no feeling left. He reaches a shell crater and dives in, landing on top of another soldier who curses and shoves him aside. 3 more men pile in after him, all of them breathing hard, all of them terrified. A German machine gun has them zeroed. Bullets crack overhead in a continuous stream. One of the soldiers in the crater, a Sergeant Morgan doesn't know, pulls out a grenade and looks at the distance to the machine gun nest. Maybe 40 yards. Too far for a throw, but close enough to see the barrel flashing. We rush it, or we die here, the sergeant says. His voice is flat, matter of fact. 4 hands go up, including Morgan's. They don't coordinate, don't count down, just explode out of the crater simultaneously and charge uphill. The machine gun swings toward them but can't track fast enough. They're screaming, incoherent rage and fear mixed together, closing the distance in seconds that feel like hours. The sergeant goes down 10 yards from the position, hit multiple times. Morgan reaches the edge of the fighting hole and empties his rifle into it, then drops a grenade for good measure. The explosion is muffled by sandbags and bodies. More Americans are reaching the crest now, flowing through gaps in the German line, firing into fighting holes and bunkers. The defense is collapsing but not breaking. German soldiers counterattack with grenades and bayonets, fighting for every foot of frozen earth. A Panzer IV appears from behind a barn, its gun swinging toward a group of American infantry. A bazooka team hits it in the side, the shape charge punching through armor and igniting ammunition. The tank's turret lifts off in a ball of orange flame. By 1100 hours, the ridge is in American hands. The cost is written in the snow. Red splashes marking where men fell, abandoned equipment scattered across the slope, burning vehicles sending black smoke into the white sky. Morgan sits on the edge of a captured fighting hole, too exhausted to feel relief, too numb to feel anything. Around him, other soldiers do the same, staring at nothing, their faces blank with shock. The Germans have withdrawn to the next defensive line, half a mile closer to Bastogne. The pattern will repeat. Another approach, another killing ground, another assault that costs more lives than anyone wants to count. The 6th Armored Division is being bled white, but they're still moving forward. Captain Fisher appears, his uniform torn and blackened with smoke. He's lost his helmet somewhere. There's blood on his face from a shrapnel wound he doesn't seem to notice. He looks at his remaining men, does a quick head count, and his expression says everything about the numbers. He says reorganize and prepare to move, because they can't stop. Bastogne is 1 mile away now, so close they can hear the sound of fighting from the surrounded garrison. The 101st Airborne still holding, still fighting, still waiting for relief that has to arrive soon or not at all. Every hour of delay means more wounded dying from lack of medical care, more ammunition expended that can't be replaced, more German reinforcements arriving to tighten the noose. Patterson finds Morgan and sits down next to him without asking. The kid's face is gray with cold and exhaustion. His hands are still shaking. He looks at the bodies scattered across the slope and then looks away. "Does it get easier?" Patterson asks. Morgan thinks about lying, thinks about offering some comforting platitude, but decides the kid deserves truth. No, you just get better at living with it. The wind picks up again, carrying fresh snow and the distant sound of artillery. The blizzard isn't finished. Neither are the Germans, neither are the Americans. Bastogne waits, 1 mile and 1,000 yards of hell away.
The reorganization takes longer than expected, because there's less to reorganize than anyone wants to admit. Companies that started the day at 60% strength are now down to 40. Tank platoons that began with 5 Shermans are operating with 2. The cold has become its own enemy, as deadly as German guns. Cases of frostbite are climbing. Men lose fingers and toes to the brutal temperatures. Equipment fails at critical moments. At 1300 hours, a jeep arrives from division headquarters, carrying orders and a liaison officer with fresh maps. The main thrust by 4th Armored Division has stalled completely 3 miles east. They've hit prepared defenses anchored by dug-in Panthers and can't break through. The entire weight of the relief effort now rests on the 6th Armored Division's battered columns. There is no backup plan. There is no reserve force waiting to take over if they fail. The liaison officer, a major with a clean uniform and warm gloves, spreads his map on the hood of a half-track. He traces the route with a gloved finger, explaining the situation as if briefing a training exercise, rather than describing the last desperate push of exhausted men. Intelligence indicates German strength in Assenois village is approximately company strength, reinforced with armor. Once you clear Assenois, it's a straight run into Bastogne's perimeter. The 101st knows you're coming. They'll suppress fire when they see American armor. Captain Fisher studies the map with red-rimmed eyes. What about the woods on either side of the road? Likely occupied, but we don't have accurate strength estimates. So we drive straight up the road into whatever they have waiting, hope we punch through before they cut us to pieces. The major closes his map case. Those are your orders, Captain. The 101st has maybe 24 hours of ammunition left. After that, they'll have to surrender or die in place. Fisher doesn't respond. The major climbs back into his jeep and drives away, returning to a headquarters that has heat and hot coffee and officers who don't have to watch men die for every 100 yards of frozen Belgium. Morgan watches this exchange from 20 feet away, close enough to hear but far enough to maintain the pretense that he wasn't listening. He knows what's coming. Every soldier in the column knows what's coming. They're going to charge straight down that road because there's no other option, and some of them will make it through, and some of them won't, and that's the only mathematics that matters anymore. The attack on Assenois begins at 14:45 hours with a 15-minute artillery preparation that does more to announce American intentions than suppress German defenses. The barrage lifts and the armor rolls forward, a column of Shermans and half-tracks moving at maximum speed down the narrow road.
The plan is simple because complicated plans require time and resources they don't have. Hit hard, hit fast, don't stop for anything. The Germans open fire when the lead tanks are 200 yards from the village. A Panzer IV positioned behind a stone wall fires 3 times in rapid succession. The first Sherman explodes, the second loses a track, the third returns fire and scores a hit that sets the Panzer smoking. Machine guns open up from windows and doorways. A Panzerfaust streaks out and misses high, the motor contrail leaving a white contrail in the gray air. The American tanks don't slow down. They fire on the move, pumping 75mm rounds into buildings, into suspected firing positions, into anything that looks like it might contain Germans. The half-tracks follow close behind, their 50 caliber guns raking the upper stories of houses. Infantry dismounts under fire, rushing forward in small groups, clearing buildings with grenades and rifle fire. Morgan's squad hits a 2-story house on the eastern edge of the village. They stack up beside the door, Patterson carrying the bar now because their regular gunner caught a bullet in the neck during the ridge assault. Morgan kicks the door open and throws in a grenade. The explosion blows out windows and fills the interior with smoke. They rush in, weapons up, clearing each room with movements that are becoming automatic through repetition and adrenaline. A German soldier stumbles out of the smoke, hands reaching for a weapon, or maybe reaching to surrender. Morgan never knows which, because he shoots twice without thinking. The man falls backward and doesn't move. They clear the second floor, find it empty, and take up positions at the windows overlooking the street. The battle for Asnoy is vicious and short. The Germans are tough, experienced, well-positioned, but they're outnumbered, and the Americans are fighting with the desperation of men who know their brothers are dying 1 mile away. By 15:30 hours, the village is secure. The cost is another 3 tanks, 2 half-tracks, and casualties that nobody has time to count properly. Captain Fisher doesn't wait for a complete reorganization. He gathers every vehicle that can still move, every soldier who can still fight, and forms them into a single strike force. The sun is already low on the horizon. What little daylight penetrates the clouds will be gone in an hour. They have to reach Bastogne before dark, or risk getting cut off themselves, surrounded in the same trap they're trying to break. The final push begins at 1600 hours. 23 tanks, 11 half-tracks, and roughly 300 infantry racing north on a road that leads straight to the encircled garrison. German artillery opens up immediately, shells landing alongside the road, trying to break up the column. An 88mm gun positioned in a farmhouse takes out the lead Sherman. The second tank pushes the burning wreck off the road and keeps moving. They're past the point of tactics now. This is a cavalry charge in mechanized form, a desperate gamble that speed and momentum can overcome prepared defenses. Machine gun fire from the woods on both sides stitches across vehicles and men. Soldiers fall from half-tracks and are left behind because stopping means dying. A Panther appears on a side road, its long 75mm gun tracking towards the column. 3 Shermans engage it simultaneously, trading armor and firepower for numbers. The Panther brews up, but not before killing 2 of its attackers. Morgan grips the side of his half-track as it bounces over frozen ruts and shell craters. The driver's hunched over the wheel, trying to maintain speed while avoiding obstacles that materialize out of the snow. The 50 cal gunner traverses constantly, firing controlled bursts at muzzle flashes in the tree line. Men around Morgan return fire with rifles and bars, shooting at targets they can barely see, suppressing positions through volume rather than accuracy. Ahead, through the snow and smoke, Morgan catches his first glimpse of Bastogne. The town sits in a shallow depression, church spires and damaged buildings visible against the gray sky. American flags hang from several positions, defiant markers of continued resistance. And around the town's perimeter, he can see foxholes in fighting positions, the dug-in defenders of the 101st Airborne who have held this ground for 8 days against everything the Wehrmacht could have thrown at them. A flare arcs up from the American lines, red against the white sky. The recognition signal. The 101st has spotted the relief column and is holding fire. The lead Sherman crashes through a German roadblock, scattering logs and sandbags, and suddenly they're through. They're inside the perimeter. They've made it. The half-track slides to a stop in a shell-cratered square. Morgan jumps down, his legs nearly buckling after hours of tension and cold. Around him, other soldiers are dismounting, looking around in disbelief that they actually made it. Paratroopers emerge from defensive positions, their uniforms ragged, their faces gaunt, but their weapons ready and their eyes sharp. These are men who have been surrounded, outnumbered, outgunned, and refuse to break. A lieutenant from the 101st approaches Captain Fisher. His left arm is in a sling, his uniform is more holes than fabric, but he's grinning. "Took you long enough?" Fisher, covered in soot and blood and exhaustion, grins back. Traffic was terrible. The siege of Bastogne is broken. The corridor is narrow, barely a road's width, and the Germans will spend the next weeks trying to close it again. But for now, in this moment, it's enough. Wounded can be evacuated, ammunition and medical supplies can flow in. The garrison that was supposed to surrender has been relieved by the green replacements who weren't supposed to be good enough. Morgan sits down on the running board of a burned-out truck and realizes he's shaking. Not from cold this time, but from the release of tension that's been building for 3 days. Patterson collapses next to him, still clutching the bar, and neither of them speaks for a long time. The blizzard continues. The war continues. But Bastogne stands, held by men the Germans dismissed as second-rate, relieved by soldiers they mocked as untested. The snow falls on green uniforms and veteran uniforms alike, coating everyone the same color, because in the end, it didn't matter who was experienced and who was new.
What mattered was who kept moving forward when everything said to stop. Night falls over Bastogne, bringing it with temperatures that make the previous days feel mild by comparison. 20 below zero, maybe colder. The kind of cold that turns breath to ice crystals, that makes metal brittle, that kills as surely as bullets. But inside the perimeter, men who have been cold and hungry and desperate for over a week finally have hope. The supply convoy that followed the combat elements begins arriving within the hour. Trucks carrying ammunition, medical supplies, rations, and winter clothing inch their way up the narrow corridor under sporadic German artillery fire. Some don't make it, blown apart by shells or knocked off the road by near misses, but enough get through, enough to make a difference. Morgan helps unload crates of .30 caliber ammunition, stacking them in a partially collapsed building that serves as a supply point. His hands are clumsy with cold and fatigue, but he keeps working because movement is better than thinking. Around him, paratroopers from the 101st work alongside the men from the 6th Armored. No distinction between rescuers and rescued. They're all just soldiers trying to survive another night. A medic station has been set up in the basement of a church. The wounded from both the garrison and the relief force overflow the available space. Men lying on stretchers in hallways and alcoves, waiting for treatment that arrives too slowly for some. The doctors and medics work without pause, performing surgery by flashlight, rationing morphine, making choices about who gets treatment first and who has to wait. Nobody talks about the third category, the ones who won't make it regardless of treatment. Captain Fisher finds Morgan around 2100 hours. The captain's face has aged a decade in 3 days. He's moving stiffly, favoring his left side where shrapnel caught him during the final push. He refused evacuation, claiming the wound wasn't serious enough to warrant taking up space in an ambulance. Morgan suspects it's worse than Fisher admits. Division wants a head count, Fisher says. Casualties, operational vehicles, ammunition status. The Germans are going to counterattack, try to cut the corridor. We need to know what we have left to fight with. Morgan nods, too tired to speak. He knows the numbers will be ugly. Half the company is gone, killed or wounded or missing. The survivors are running on nothing but adrenaline and stubbornness. Get some rest first, Fisher adds. 2 hours, then we'll do the count. It's the closest thing to kindness that exists in this place. Morgan finds a corner of a cellar not already occupied by sleeping soldiers and sits down with his back against cold stone. He doesn't think he'll be able to sleep, his mind too full of images from the past 3 days, but exhaustion takes him under within minutes. He dreams of the Ridge assault, of charging uphill through machine gun fire. Except in the dream, the slope never ends, and the bullets never stop, and he runs forever through frozen hell. He wakes gasping, confused about where he is, reaching for his rifle before recognizing the cellar, the sleeping men around him, the relative safety of being inside Bastogne's perimeter. Someone has started a small fire in a metal barrel, the smoke venting through a broken window. A group of paratroopers huddle around it, sharing a canteen of coffee that probably tastes like battery acid, but represents something approaching civilization. One of them sees Morgan stirring and waves him over. "You're with the 6th Armored?" the paratrooper asks. He's a corporal, his face blackened with soot and stubble, a bandage wrapped around his head. Morgan confirms with a nod, accepting the canteen when it's passed to him. The coffee is indeed terrible, but it's hot, and that counts for everything. We weren't sure anyone was coming, the corporal says. He's not looking at Morgan, staring into the flames instead. Command kept saying relief was on the way, but after 6 days, 7 days, you start to wonder. We were down to maybe 3 rounds per rifle. The artillery had 50 shells left total. Another day, and we would have been throwing rocks. We came as fast as we could, Morgan says, and immediately regrets how defensive it sounds. Not complaining, just saying we're glad you made it. The corporal finally looks at him. Where does the Krauts were calling you guys green replacements, said you wouldn't last a day in real combat. Morgan thinks about the ridge assault of Assenois, about the final desperate charge up the road. He thinks about Patterson crying and shooting at the same time, about the sergeant who died rushing a machine gun nest, about all the green replacements who proved they could fight just fine when it mattered. Yeah, well, guess they were wrong, Morgan says. The corporal grins, a flash of white teeth and a dirty face. Guess so? Outside, German artillery continues its sporadic harassment fire, shells landing randomly throughout the town. Everyone has learned to distinguish between the dangerous close impacts and the ones that are just noise. When a shell lands near enough to shake the building, conversation pauses until the debris stops falling, then resumes as if nothing happened. This is normal now. This is life in Bastogne. At 000 hours, Morgan conducts his head count with a clipboard and a flashlight that he keeps pointed at the ground to avoid attracting attention. The numbers are worse than expected. His company, which started the relief operation with 114 men, now has 62 present for duty. 18 are confirmed dead, 34 wounded, most of them evacuated down the corridor to field hospitals in the rear. The math is simple and brutal. He finds similar stories throughout the battalion. Tank companies that began with 15 Shermans are operating with 6. Half-tracks sit abandoned, too damaged to repair or out of fuel. Ammunition supplies are better than they were before the relief arrived, but still far short of what's needed if the Germans launch a serious counterattack. But that's tomorrow's problem. Tonight, Bastogne stands. The 101st Airborne is no longer alone. The wounded are being treated, the living are being fed, and the narrow road to the south remains open despite everything the Wehrmacht can do to close it. Dawn on December 24th arrives with clearing skies for the first time in over a week. The blizzard has finally blown itself out, leaving behind a landscape of pristine white, interrupted by the black scars of war. And with clear skies comes something the Germans have learned to fear: American air power. The first C-47 transports appear around 0900 hours, flying low over Bastogne, dropping supplies by parachute. The multicolored chutes blossom against the blue sky like flowers in a dead garden. Ammunition, medical supplies, food, winter clothing, everything the garrison needs to keep fighting. The paratroopers cheer, the first genuine celebration since the siege. Fighter bombers follow, P-47 Thunderbolts diving on German positions around the perimeter. Their bombs and rockets tear into artillery emplacements, tank concentrations, supply columns. For 8 days, the Wehrmacht has operated with near impunity, using the bad weather to position forces and prepare attacks. Now, suddenly, they're exposed and vulnerable. Morgan watches from a battered foxhole on the east edge of town. The sun is bright, almost painful after days of gray overcast. The air is cold enough to burn his lungs, but the sky is clear and the planes keep coming, and for the first time since this whole nightmare has begun, he allows himself to believe they might actually survive this. Patterson finds him there, the kid looking older somehow, despite only 3 days passing since they left Erlon. Combat ages people in ways that have nothing to do with time. Patterson has seen things now, done things that have fundamentally changed who he is. The green replacement who froze during the first ambush is gone. What remains is something harder, more capable, and infinitely sadder. We're getting rotated to secondary positions, Patterson says. The captain wants us rested in case the Germans try something tonight. They walk back through town together, navigating streets choked with rubble and abandoned equipment. Civilians emerge from cellars, blinking in the sunlight, surveying the damage to their homes. Children play in the snow, seemingly oblivious to the destruction around them, or perhaps just resilient enough to find normalcy wherever they can.
In a damaged square, someone has erected a small Christmas tree, decorated with parachute silk and spent shell casings. Tomorrow's Christmas Day. Most of the men haven't thought about it, too focused on survival to remember holidays. But seeing that tree, that small gesture towards civilization and hope, hits harder than expected. Morgan stops and looks at it for a long moment. Behind him, Patterson does the same. "Merry Christmas," Patterson says quietly. "Merry Christmas," Morgan replies. They move on, towards their assigned rest area, towards whatever comes next. The siege is broken, but the battle continues. The Germans still hold the high ground around Bastogne, still control most of the roads, still have the strength to attack. The corridor remains narrow and vulnerable. Relief has arrived, but victory is still distant. None of that changes what happened over the past 3 days. The green replacements who weren't supposed to be good enough fought through everything the Wehrmacht could throw at them. They paid in blood for every mile, sacrificed themselves for men they'd never met, and proved that courage and determination matter more than experience.
The German officers who laughed at the American reinforcements aren't laughing anymore. They've learned what soldiers throughout history keep having to learn, that you can't judge a man's worth by his uniform or his training record. You can only judge by what he does when everything is falling apart and someone has to step forward anyway. Bastogne stands. The 101st Airborne lives to fight another day, and the men of the 6th Armored Division, veterans and replacements alike, have earned the right to call themselves soldiers in the truest sense of the word.